The scent of pine and wet earth filled my nostrils as I lay perfectly still on my bed, listening to the hushed whispers outside my door. My family thought I couldn't hear them discussing my fate, deciding what to do with the burden I had become. 3 years had passed since I'd convinced everyone that the accident had left me paralyzed from the waist down. 3 years of absolute stillness whenever anyone was watching. 3 years of exercising in secret during the dead of night to keep my muscles from atrophying. 3 years of the greatest lie I'd ever told. The Alpha King's envoy arrives tomorrow. They'll be selecting 5 females from our pack. My father's voice carried through the thin walls. Perhaps we should present her as well. My mother's voice cracked with emotion. Present Alara? Are you mad? She can't walk, Henrik. The shame it would bring to present a broken daughter to the Alpha King. I stared at the ceiling. My blonde hair splayed across the pillow like pale sunlight. The familiar ache of isolation wrapped around my chest. In our werewolf society, being disabled meant being worthless. A female who couldn't run with the pack, who couldn't bear strong children. What use was she? I'd heard the whispers. Poor Ilara. Such beautiful features wasted on a broken body. My fingers found the small silver pendant hanging from my neck, my grandmother's parting gift before she died. The moon etched into its surface had worn smooth from years of my anxious rubbing. Remember, little one, she'd whispered on her deathbed. Sometimes the greatest strength is in making others believe you have none. At the time, I thought she was offering comfort for my perceived weakness. Now I understood she'd been giving me permission to survive by any means necessary. A floorboard creaked outside my bedroom, and I immediately relaxed my legs, allowing them to lie limp and lifeless as my younger sister, Mara, pushed open the door without knocking. "Are you awake?" she asked, her voice carrying the casual cruelty of someone who had never known real suffering. At 19, just a year younger than me, Mara had blossomed in the shadow of my tragedy. While I faded into the background, she shone brightly in the pack's activities, drawing attention and admirers with her physical prowess and sharp tongue. "Yes," I answered softly, my hands automatically straightening the blanket across my unmoving legs. Mara flopped onto the edge of my bed, carelessly jostling me. I didn't flinch when my legs were moved by the impact, a mistake I'd made early in my deception that I'd never repeated. "Everyone's talking about the Alpha King's envoy," she said, excitement coloring her voice. 5 girls will be chosen to go to the royal court as potential mates. Can you imagine? One might even become queen. Her eyes gleamed with ambition. "Father says I'm certain to be selected." I offered a smile I hoped appeared genuinely happy for her. "You'd make a beautiful queen," I said truthfully. Despite her casual cruelty, Mara was objectively beautiful, though beauty alone wouldn't win the heart of the notorious Alpha King Nathaniel Blackthorn. Rumors of his ruthlessness and cunning had reached even our remote northern pack. "I know," she replied without modesty. "Mother's already preparing my finest clothes." She glanced around my simple room, pity flashing across her features. "I suppose it's a blessing you won't have to go through the selection process." "I hear the Alpha King tests each potential mate personally. Physical challenges, mind games. They say he can detect any weakness." My heart stuttered at her words, though I kept my expression neutral. "How fortunate for me, then," I murmured. A commotion outside drew Mara to the window. "They're setting up for tomorrow's ceremony in the village square," she said, then turned to me with sudden thoughtfulness. "Father wants you there, you know. He says the entire pack should be present to honor the envoy." Cold dread trickled down my spine. 3 years I'd maintained this charade, rarely leaving the confines of our house. The thought of being in the crowded square with so many eyes on me, so many opportunities to make a mistake. "I'm not sure if he insists," Mara cut me off. "He's already told Mother to prepare your wheelchair." She stood, smoothing her dress. "Rest well, sister. Tomorrow will be interesting." After she left, I waited 10 minutes before sliding my legs off the bed. My bare feet touched the cold wooden floor, and I rose silently, testing my weight. My muscles hummed with strength that nobody suspected I possessed. I moved to the small mirror hanging on my wall, studying my reflection in the dim light, pale blonde hair falling past my shoulders, green eyes that had learned to appear docile and unassuming, hiding the calculation behind them. I'd begun this deception when I was 17, after overhearing the pack elders discussing my approaching marriage arrangement to the cruel son of a neighboring pack alpha. I'd seen the bruises on his previous intended mate before she mysteriously disappeared. The accident I staged the next day, a fall from the cliff paths that should have killed me, instead gave birth to my paralyzed persona. Better to be pitied and forgotten than mated to a monster. But now the Alpha King's selection threatened everything. His wolves weren't just any wolves. They were trained observers, hunters of exceptional skill. And the king himself was said to possess almost supernatural abilities to detect deception. I crossed my room silently and retrieved my small pack of essentials hidden beneath a loose floorboard. Perhaps it was time to disappear for real. I'd saved enough provisions, planned enough escape routes. I could slip away before dawn, become someone new beyond pack territories. As I contemplated this option, heavy footsteps approached my door. I dove back into bed, arranging my legs in their usual lifeless position, just as my father entered. His massive frame filled the doorway, his alpha presence commanding even in our humble home. Though he was no longer the official pack leader, having ceded the position to my uncle after my mother bore no male heirs, he still carried himself with the authority of his former rank. "Alara," he said, his voice gruff with rarely displayed emotion. "Your mother says you're not eating properly again. I'm just not very hungry, father." He moved to sit beside my bed, the chair creaking under his weight. "The envoy arrives tomorrow, so I've heard." He studied me with eyes that matched my own. "You know, daughter, there was a time when you would have been first among those presented." He gestured to my legs with a pained expression. Before, I swallowed the guilt that rose in my throat. My deception had hurt him most of all. The proud alpha, now pitied for his broken daughter. "Life gives us different paths than we expect," I offered quietly. "Indeed." He hesitated, then reached out to touch my hand, a rare gesture of affection. "Alara, if there was ever anything you needed to tell me, anything at all." For one breathtaking moment, I wondered if he suspected, if those alpha instincts had detected my lie all along. My heart pounded so loudly I was certain he could hear it. "I just want to make you proud," I whispered. The truth hidden within the lie. He nodded, seeming satisfied with my answer. "The king's envoy will inspect all eligible females. Protocol demands you be present, though of course you won't be part of the selection." "Of course," I agreed, relief flooding through me. He rose, moving toward the door, then paused. "The king's emissary is unlike others we've hosted. Demon Rivers is his name, the Alpha King's most trusted advisor and friend. They say he can smell a lie from 100 paces. My father's gaze lingered on me a moment too long. "Rest well, daughter." After he left, I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. I couldn't run. Not now. Not with this Demon Rivers coming to inspect the pack. A missing daughter on the day of the royal envoy's arrival would raise too many questions. I was trapped. Sleep evaded me that night. I lay awake listening to the sounds of preparation throughout our village. Hammering, voices calling instructions, the nervous energy of a pack about to be evaluated by royalty. When the house finally quieted, I slipped from my bed and performed my nightly exercises with increased intensity, knowing I might soon need my strength. Dawn broke with a cacophony of activity. My mother bustled into my room carrying a dress I hadn't worn in years, a deep emerald gown that matched my eyes. "We need to make you presentable," she said, her voice strained. "The entire pack will be on display." She helped me bathe and dress, chattering nervously about the importance of today's ceremony, while I maintained the careful balance of helplessness I'd perfected, allowing my limbs to be moved like a doll's, never supporting my own weight, keeping my face neutral when she accidentally bumped my numb legs. When she brushed my hair, her hands stilled momentarily. "You're still so beautiful," she whispered. If only... I felt the weight of her unfinished thought. If only I were whole. If only I could have fulfilled my duty to the pack by making a strong match. If only I hadn't become a burden. The village square had transformed overnight. Colorful banners displaying the royal crest hung between buildings, flowers decorated every surface, and a large wooden platform had been constructed at the center. My father pushed my wheelchair along the cobblestone path, the jostling adding authenticity to my performance as my body moved without muscle control. Villagers parted before us, their eyes reflecting a mixture of pity and discomfort. I kept my gaze lowered, playing my part as the broken daughter. My father positioned my wheelchair at the edge of the gathering, partially hidden behind a group of elders, before joining my mother and Mara near the platform. Trumpets sounded, silencing the murmuring crowd. 6 black horses appeared on the main road, pulling an ornate carriage emblazoned with the royal crest. Behind it rode 12 elite royal guards, their postures rigid with discipline, their eyes constantly scanning for threats. The carriage door opened, and a collective breath was held as a man emerged. Even from my position, I could sense his power. Tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair and the fluid movements of a born predator, Demon Rivers surveyed the crowd with calculating eyes. The Alpha King's emissary had arrived. "Northern Pack," he called, his voice carrying effortlessly across the square. "I bring greetings from His Majesty, Alpha King Nathaniel Blackthorn." He ascended the platform with grace that belied his size. "Today, I will evaluate your eligible females for possible selection to the royal court." My uncle, the current Pack Alpha, stepped forward with a deep bow. "We are honored by His Majesty's consideration. We have prepared 5 of our finest young women for your inspection." Demon's lips curved in a slight smile. "I will decide how many are worthy, Alpha Thorn. The king has specific requirements." A ripple of unease passed through the crowd. This wasn't following the expected protocol. "Present all unmated females between 18 and 25, Demon commanded. "I will make my selections personally." My heart froze in my chest. All unmated females, not just the pre-selected 5. My mother's panicked gaze found me across the square, and I saw her whisper urgently to my father. He shook his head firmly. Protocol demanded obedience to the royal emissary. One by one, young women stepped forward, forming a line before the platform. Mara stood proudly among them, her chin lifted with confidence. 23 females in total, representing our pack's future. And then my father approached my wheelchair. "I apologize," he said to me quietly, "but we must observe protocol." With gentle hands, he wheeled me toward the line of women, positioning me at the end. Whispers erupted around us. I kept my expression calm, while terror clawed at my throat. This close to Demon Rivers. Would my deception hold? My grandmother's pendant felt suddenly heavy against my skin. The royal emissary descended from the platform, beginning his inspection. He walked slowly down the line, occasionally asking questions, studying each female with unnerving intensity. Some he passed quickly. Others he lingered before, testing their knowledge or requesting they perform simple physical tasks. When he reached Mara, his interest was immediate. "Turn," he instructed her. She complied with practiced grace. "Your scent suggests strong bloodlines. You have fighting training?" "Yes, my lord," she answered proudly. "I am skilled with both claw and fang." He nodded approvingly, before moving to the next girl. I counted his steps as he approached, each one bringing him closer to discovering my secret. 5 more girls. 4, 3, 2, and then he stood before me, his imposing figure blocking the sun. I kept my eyes downcast, my hands folded uselessly in my lap, my legs arranged in their unnatural stillness. "Look at me," he commanded. I raised my gaze slowly, meeting eyes so intensely blue, they seemed to pierce through my carefully constructed facade. Something flickered in their depths, curiosity perhaps, or suspicion. "Your name?" he asked. "Ilara Thorn," I replied softly. "Daughter of the former Alpha." It wasn't a question. His gaze traveled to my unmoving legs. "What happened?" "A falling accident, my lord. 3 years ago." Demon crouched suddenly, bringing his face level with mine. This close, I could smell his scent. Pine and smoke and something wilder beneath. His eyes held mine as his hand reached out, hovering just above my knee. "May I?" he asked, though it wasn't really a request. I nodded mutely, panic fluttering in my chest like a trapped bird. His hand descended, pressing firmly against my thigh. I forced myself not to react, not to tense the muscle beneath his touch. His fingers traveled down to my calf, then back up again. Testing, probing. "You feel nothing?" he asked. No, my lord. His eyes narrowed slightly. Pity. You have the look of a fighter. He stood again, but instead of moving on, he remained before me, studying me with unnerving focus. Bring her, he said suddenly, gesturing to two of his guards. And this one as well. He pointed to Mara, whose face lit with triumph. My lord. My father stepped forward, confusion clear on his face. My daughter Alara cannot. I'm well aware of her condition, Alpha Thorn. Demon cut him off. She will be accommodated. The guards moved to position themselves behind my wheelchair. I caught my father's panicked gaze and gave him a small, reassuring smile. Whatever happened next, I would face it as I had faced everything else, with careful calculation and the strength no one believed I possessed. As the guards began wheeling me toward the royal carriage, Demon Rivers fell into step beside me, leaning down to speak in a voice only I could hear. The Alpha King will be most interested in meeting you, Alara Thorn, he said, his tone carrying an undercurrent I couldn't quite identify. Most interested indeed. His words sent a chill racing down my supposedly lifeless spine. Somehow in that moment, I knew with absolute certainty the game I had been playing for 3 years was about to change forever. The royal carriage smelled of leather and power. I sat rigidly in my wheelchair, secured by straps to prevent accidents during travel, while Mara perched on the plush seat opposite me, barely containing her excitement. Beside her sat 2 other girls selected from neighboring packs, both beautiful, both watching me with undisguised curiosity. No one had expected the paralyzed daughter to be chosen. Why do you think he selected you? Mara whispered when Demon Rivers stepped outside to speak with his guards. Her question dripped with genuine confusion rather than malice. In her world, my broken body disqualified me from any consideration. I shrugged slightly. Perhaps they need someone to attend to the chosen ones at court. The lie tasted bitter, but I maintained my placid expression. Mara seemed satisfied with this explanation. Of course, that makes sense. She returned to preening, adjusting her hair in the reflection of the carriage window. The door opened again, and Demon Rivers folded his imposing frame into the space across from me. The carriage lurched forward, beginning the journey that would either be my salvation or my undoing. We ride for the Summer Palace, Demon announced. 3 days' journey. You'll be evaluated further there before the final selection for the royal court. His gaze lingered on me. All accommodations have been arranged. I focused on keeping my breathing steady, my legs still. 3 days in close proximity to the Alpha King's most trusted advisor, a man rumored to detect lies with preternatural accuracy. 3 days of maintaining my deception without the privacy I'd relied on for 3 years. The weight of my grandmother's pendant seemed to increase against my chest, a reminder of her wisdom. Sometimes the greatest strength is in making others believe you have none. The journey blurred into a haze of calculated movements. Each time we stopped to rest, guards lifted me from the carriage as if I were made of glass. I allowed my body to hang limply in their arms, my head lolling against their shoulders, fighting the instinct to balance myself. Each night at the luxury inns along the royal road, female attendants bathed and dressed me, their hands clinical and impersonal on my unfeeling limbs. All the while, I felt Demon Rivers watching. Not obviously, he was too skilled for that, but I sensed his attention in the weight of silence, in the way he always positioned himself with a clear view of my wheelchair, in the questions he asked that seemed innocent but probed at the edges of my story. On the second night, as we dined in a private room at the finest inn I'd ever seen, he addressed me directly for the first time since our departure. Lady Alara, you've been very quiet throughout our journey. All eyes turned to me. I offered a small smile. I have little to contribute to discussions of court life and royal protocols, my lord. Yet you listen carefully to everything, he observed. Your eyes miss nothing. My pulse quickened. Had I been too observant, too alert? I lowered my gaze, adopting the demure posture I'd practiced. When one cannot participate in life's activities, one learns to find interest in watching others. Demon leaned forward, his elbows on the table. Tell me about your accident. The abrupt change of subject caught me off guard, but I'd rehearsed this story countless times. I was walking along the cliff path that borders our territory. The ground gave way beneath me. I fell 30 feet onto the rocks below. And survived, he noted, his intense blue eyes never leaving mine. "By the grace of the moon goddess," I replied, the standard response in our culture to unexplainable fortune. "Yet you never regained the use of your legs." His statement hung in the air between us. The pack healer said my spine was damaged beyond repair. Demon took a slow sip of wine, his gaze still locked with mine. "Interesting that your father didn't seek healers from outside your pack. The royal court has medicine men who have performed miracles." Ice flooded my veins. I hadn't prepared for this line of questioning. "My father—" I paused, searching for a plausible explanation. "My father believed it was the goddess's will, that I was being taught a lesson in humility." "And were you?" Demon asked softly. "Were you prideful before your fall, Lady Alara?" The question felt like a trap. "I was different," I answered carefully. "Younger, less appreciative of life's blessings." Mara laughed suddenly. Ilara was wild before her accident. Always climbing trees, racing with the boys, talking back to the elders. She shook her head, oblivious to my discomfort. Father used to say she had more wolf than woman in her. Demon's eyes gleamed with something that might have been amusement. "Is that so?" I forced a self-deprecating smile. "The goddess has ways of taming wild spirits." "Perhaps," he conceded, though his expression suggested he believed otherwise. "Or perhaps wild spirits simply find new ways to express themselves." The conversation shifted to other topics, but the weight of his suspicion lingered in the air between us. That night, locked in my private chamber, I paced silently across the floor, stretching muscles that ached from forced inactivity. My mind raced with possibilities. Should I attempt to escape? Where would I go? The royal guard surrounded the inn, and even if I managed to slip past them, I was days away from any territory I knew. The summer palace appeared on the horizon at midday on the third day, a gleaming structure of white stone and glass that caught the sunlight like a massive diamond. Spires reached toward the clouds, and vast gardens surrounded it on all sides, a riot of color and fragrance that perfumed the air even from a distance. "The king awaits," Demon announced as our carriage passed through gilded gates. A small army of servants lined the main entrance, their heads bowed in deference. My heart hammered against my ribs as the carriage door opened. This was it. I would soon be face to face with Alpha King Nathaniel Blackthorne himself, a man whose reputation for ruthlessness and cunning was matched only by rumors of his uncanny ability to see through deception. Servants transferred me to a palace wheelchair, ornately carved from pale wood with cushions of deep blue velvet. As they wheeled me up the marble ramp built alongside the main staircase, Mara and the other girls followed, their eyes wide with wonder at our surroundings. The throne room doors stood 20 feet tall, carved with the history of the royal bloodline. They swung open silently, revealing a vast chamber of marble and gold. Sunlight streamed through high windows, illuminating the massive throne at the far end and the man who occupied it. Alpha King Nathaniel Blackthorne was younger than I'd expected, perhaps 30, with the coiled stillness of a predator at rest. His features were sharp, aristocratic, framed by dark hair that brushed his shoulders. But it was his eyes that captured me, amber with flecks of gold, watching us with the patient assessment of a wolf selecting its prey. "Your Majesty," Demon bowed deeply, "I present the selected females from the northern territories." The king's gaze moved over our small group, lingering briefly on Mara's obvious beauty, before settling on me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. "You've brought me a cripple, Demon?" His voice was deep, cultured, with an underlying note of something dangerous. "I've brought you an enigma, my king," Demon replied, his tone suggesting private meaning. The king's eyebrow arched slightly. He rose from his throne with fluid grace, descending the 3 steps to approach our group. The other girls immediately dropped into deep curtsies. Mara shot me a panicked glance, clearly wondering how I should show proper respect from my wheelchair. Before she could speak, the king stood before me. Up close, his presence was overwhelming, power radiating from him in almost tangible waves. I lowered my eyes respectfully, inclining my head. "Lady Alara Thorne," he said, my name rolling from his tongue as if he'd spoken it before. "Daughter of former Alpha Henrik Thorne, paralyzed 3 years ago in a tragic accident." He crouched before my wheelchair, bringing his face level with mine. An echo of Demon's evaluation in my village square. Look at me. I raised my gaze to meet his. Something flashed in those amber depths. Recognition, perhaps? Or merely the satisfaction of a monarch being obeyed. You're far from home, little wolf, he said softly. Yes, your majesty. And you came willingly, despite your condition. I hesitated, weighing truth against safety. I follow the will of my pack and my king. His lips curved in a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Diplomatic. I wonder what other talents you hide. He straightened, turning to address the entire group. You will all be guests in my palace for 1 month. During this time, you will be tested in various ways to determine your compatibility with royal life. Tested. The word hung in the air like a threat. I kept my expression neutral while my mind raced. Lady Alara, the king continued, given your unique circumstances, I've arranged special accommodations. Demon will show you to your quarters. He addressed the other girls. The rest of you will follow Lady Serena, my sister, who will explain the protocols of court life. A beautiful woman with the same amber eyes as the king appeared from a side door, her expression coolly assessing as she beckoned to Mara and the others. My sister threw me a conflicted glance, part concern, part relief at being separated from the burden of my care, before following Lady Serena from the throne room. As the doors closed behind them, I suddenly realized I was alone with the 2 most dangerous men in the kingdom. Demon moved behind my wheelchair, beginning to push me toward a different exit. My chambers are in the west wing, the king said, falling into step beside us. Lady Alara's rooms should be nearby. All has been arranged as you requested, sire, Demon replied. They spoke over my head as if I weren't present, discussing my care requirements and special needs, while we traveled through opulent corridors. Servants bowed as we passed, their eyes widening at the sight of the king personally escorting a woman in a wheelchair. We stopped before an ornately carved door. The king himself pushed it open, revealing chambers more luxurious than any I'd ever seen. A sitting room with plush furniture, tall windows overlooking the gardens, and doorways leading to what I assumed were a bedchamber and bathing room. These will be your quarters during your stay, the king announced as Demon wheeled me inside. I've had certain modifications made for your comfort. I noticed the widened doorways, the ramps replacing steps, the pulleys installed near the bed that would presumably help me transfer myself without assistance. The attention to detail was impressive and terrifying. How long did they expect me to maintain this charade? Your Majesty is most considerate, I murmured. Demon will assign attendants to assist you, the king continued. However, I thought you might appreciate some privacy after your journey. He turned to his advisor. Leave us. Alarm flared in my chest, but I kept my expression placid. Demon hesitated. A flicker of something. Concern? Warning? Crossing his features before he bowed. As you wish, my king. He departed, closing the door quietly behind him. The king circled my wheelchair slowly, his footsteps silent on the thick carpet. Are you comfortable, Lady Alara? Yes, your majesty. These rooms are beautiful. He moved to stand before the large window, sunlight illuminating his powerful frame. Do you know why you're here? I swallowed nervously. Lord Damon selected me along with the other females. But you are not like the other females, are you? He turned, fixing me with that unnerving amber gaze. They are here as potential mates. What purpose could a paralyzed she-wolf serve in my court? The question demanded an answer I didn't have. I don't know, your majesty. He approached me again, kneeling before my wheelchair with a grace that belied his size. This close, his scent enveloped me. Sandalwood and something wild, intoxicating. I think you do know, he said softly. His hand reached out, hovering just above my knee. May I? Heart thundering in my chest, I nodded. His hand descended, warm and heavy through the fabric of my dress. Unlike Demon's clinical touch, the king's fingers moved with deliberate slowness, tracing patterns against my thigh. Tell me, Lady Alara, he murmured, his eyes never leaving mine. What would you do if I told you I know you can walk? For one crystalline moment, time seemed to stop. The air caught in my lungs, and my mind emptied of everything except the king's amber eyes watching me with predatory focus. His hand remained on my thigh, warm, heavy, terrifyingly intimate. "I don't understand, Your Majesty," I whispered, clinging to my deception with desperate fingers even as it unraveled. "Of course I cannot walk." His lips curved into a smile that held no warmth. "Your heart is racing, little wolf. I can hear it." His fingers pressed more firmly against my leg, just as I can feel the muscle tension beneath my hand, a tension that shouldn't exist in truly paralyzed limbs. Ice flooded my veins. 3 years of careful deception undone in 3 minutes by this man who saw too much. I kept my expression neutral even as panic clawed at my throat. "Fear does strange things to the body, Your Majesty," I attempted. "Even damaged parts can react." He laughed then. A low, dangerous sound. "Clever, but not clever enough." His hand moved higher on my thigh, his touch deliberate. "Shall I tell you what else I know? I know you exercise at night to maintain your strength. I know you fooled your entire pack for years. I know you staged your accident to escape something, or someone." My breath caught. How could he possibly know these things? Had Demon been spying on me even before he arrived at our village? The thought sent a fresh wave of terror through me. "What I don't know," he continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper, "is why. Why would a young she-wolf with everything to gain choose to live as an invalid? What were you running from, Alara Thorn?" The use of my name without title felt like an invasion, intimate and commanding. I remained silent, calculation racing behind my eyes. If I admitted the truth, what would he do? If I continued to deny it, how would he prove his accusation? As if reading my thoughts, the king's eyes hardened. "You have 2 choices. Show me you can stand right now on your own terms, or I will force the truth from you in ways far less pleasant." My grandmother's pendant seemed to burn against my skin, her words echoing in my mind. "Sometimes the greatest strength is in making others believe you have none," but that strategy had reached its limit. The king wasn't just suspicious, he was certain. "Why does it matter to you?" I asked, playing for time. What interest could the Alpha King have in one insignificant she-wolf's deception? His hand moved from my leg to grasp my chin, holding my gaze to his. "Because you interest me. Because nothing happens in my kingdom without my knowledge. Because I want to know what kind of woman has the courage, or foolishness, to maintain such an elaborate lie." His thumb traced my lower lip, the gesture both threat and caress. And because I reward honesty nearly as severely as I punish deception, I believed him. Everything about Nathaniel Blackthorn radiated absolute authority and the capacity for calculated cruelty. Yet something in his eyes, a glimmer of respect, perhaps, gave me the sliver of courage I needed. "If I show you the truth," I said carefully, "what happens then?" He released my face and stood, towering over me. "Then we have a private conversation about your future at my court. A conversation between equals, rather than between a king and a liar." Equals. The word hung between us, impossible, and yet somehow sincere. I took a deep breath, weighing my options one final time. There were none. "Very well." I placed my hands on the armrests of the wheelchair, feeling the texture of the velvet beneath my fingertips. With deliberate slowness, I pushed myself to a standing position, my legs strong and steady beneath me after years of secret maintenance. I stood before the Alpha King, our eyes almost level due to my height. The pretense of weakness finally abandoned. His expression remained unreadable, though something flickered in those amber depths. Satisfaction, certainly, but something else too, something that made my pulse quicken. 3 years, he said, circling me slowly. 3 years of absolute deception, maintained against an entire pack of werewolves with enhanced senses. Impressive. I remained still, watching him from the corner of my eye as he moved behind me. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "Now," he said, completing his circle to stand before me again. "You tell me why." I hesitated. The truth was deeply personal, a shameful admission of my own cowardice. Yet standing before him, I found I couldn't construct another lie. "I was to be mated to the son of a neighboring pack's alpha," I began, my voice low. "Damon Claw. He had a reputation for cruelty, especially toward women. I saw what he did to his previous intended mate before she disappeared. I swallowed hard, the memories rising unbidden. They said she ran away, but there was so much blood in her room. The king's expression darkened. Claw. I know of them. A small pack in the northeastern territories. I nodded. My father arranged the match for political reasons. I heard them discussing it, how I would be sent away after my 20th birthday, how the alliance would strengthen our position. My fingers found my grandmother's pendant, drawing strength from its familiar contours. I couldn't fight the arrangement openly. My father's word was law, so I created an alternative, the accident, the king supplied. Yes, I staged the fall carefully. The rocks below were dangerous enough to make severe injury believable, but I controlled my descent to avoid true harm. I smiled grimly. The real performance began afterward, convincing the healers, my family, the entire pack that I could no longer feel or move my legs. And no one suspected? In 3 years? I shrugged slightly. People see what they expect to see. A tragedy is easier to accept than deception from a pack member. And I hesitated, then continued. I made certain sacrifices to maintain the illusion. Isolation. Limited mobility when others were present. The burden of constant vigilance, the king listed, understanding in his voice. All to avoid a mating you didn't choose. All to avoid being beaten, raped, or killed by a monster wearing the skin of a wolf, I corrected, my tone sharper than I intended. Forgive me, Your Majesty, but you asked for truth, rather than anger at my impertinence. The king's lips curved in genuine amusement. So I did. Please continue to be candid. It's refreshing. He gestured to the sitting area. Shall we be comfortable while we talk? It was surreal to walk normally across the room, to sit in an elegant chair with the Alpha King opposite me, as if I were an honored guest, rather than a woman who had just admitted to a massive deception. He studied me with open curiosity. What did you plan to do next? You couldn't maintain the charade forever. I was saving resources for an escape, I admitted. Money, provisions. I planned to disappear beyond pack territories, change my name, build a new life somewhere humans outnumber werewolves. Ambitious, he commented. And now? Your carefully constructed escape has been derailed by my envoy's selection. I met his gaze directly. Now I am at your mercy, Your Majesty. You know my secret. You could expose me to my family, to my pack. You could send me back to face the consequences of my deception, my hands clenched in my lap. Or you could send me to Claw anyway, as my father originally intended. The king leaned forward, his eyes intense. Is that what you think I'll do? Trade you like property to cement a political alliance? Isn't that how pack politics work? Especially for females. The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. I had never dared speak so candidly before. Not in my kingdom, he said firmly. Not anymore. I blinked in surprise. Then what will you do with me? He considered me for a long moment. That depends on you, Alara Thorne. You've demonstrated remarkable intelligence, determination, and courage, all qualities I value. You've also demonstrated a willingness to deceive when it serves your purposes. To survive, I corrected quietly. Indeed. He nodded. Survival is a powerful motivator. But now you must decide, will you continue to survive through deception, or are you ready to live as yourself, with all the risks and rewards that entails? The question penetrated to the heart of my existence for the past 3 years. Who was I without my carefully constructed facade? What would it mean to walk openly, to claim my strength, to face the world without the shield of perceived weakness? What are you offering? I asked cautiously. A position at court. Officially, you will be part of the selection process like the other females, though we both know you are not here as a potential mate. His expression was unreadable. Unofficially, you will be my eyes and ears among the candidates. You will report to me what they say when I am not present, how they behave when they believe no one important is watching. You want me to spy for you, I translated. I want you to do what you've clearly become skilled at, observing while being underestimated. He smiled, a predatory flash of teeth. With one critical difference, you will walk, Alara. No more wheelchair, no more pretense of physical weakness. My heart stuttered. But if I suddenly recover, questions will be asked. My sister is here. She'll write to my parents. Leave that to me, he said with casual confidence. A royal miracle healing is not without precedent. My court includes healers with special abilities. Who would question their success, especially when ordered by the king himself? The offer was tempting. Freedom from my wheelchair, protection from Claw, a position of some influence at court. Yet the calculation in the king's eyes made me wary. And if I refuse, his expression hardened. Then you leave tomorrow, your secret intact, with enough gold to start your new life beyond pack territories, and my personal guarantee that you will never be mated to Claw or any wolf against your will. I stared at him in shock. You would let me go? Just like that? I admire strength, Alara. I reward loyalty. But I do not force either. He stood, moving to the window to gaze out at the gardens. You have until morning to decide. For tonight, you may continue your charade. Your attendants will arrive shortly to help you prepare for dinner. He turned back to me, his powerful frame silhouetted against the fading daylight. One last thing. Regardless of your decision, what has transpired between us remains private. No one, not even Demon, knows that I've confronted you. With that, he moved toward the door, then paused, his hand on the ornate handle. Consider carefully, little wolf. The path of deception may feel safer, but it is a lonely road indeed. After he departed, I sat motionless in the chair, my mind reeling. The king had offered me a choice, the first real choice I'd had in years, freedom and solitude, or a dangerous game at court under his protection. Either way, my life as I knew it was over. The attendants arrived as promised, 3 young women who treated me with careful deference, bathing me, dressing me in a gown of midnight blue silk, arranging my blonde hair in an elegant style adorned with small crystal pins that caught the light like stars. All the while I remained limp in their hands, maintaining my deception one last time, while my mind churned with possibilities. At dinner, I was seated near the king but not next to him, close enough to observe, far enough to avoid suspicion. My sister Mara held court at the other end of the table, already popular among the other candidates and royal courtiers. She barely glanced my way, too absorbed in her new admirers. Demon Rivers sat at the king's right hand, his penetrating blue eyes occasionally finding mine across the table. Did he suspect as the king had? Or had he simply selected me on his master's orders, for reasons he himself didn't understand? As servants wheeled me back to my chambers after the meal, I caught the king watching me, his amber eyes gleaming in the candlelight. A slight nod, acknowledgement of our shared secret, a reminder of the decision that awaited me. In the privacy of my rooms, I paced for hours, weighing my options. Freedom versus protection. Solitude versus connection. The familiar safety of deception versus the terrifying possibility of truth. Near dawn, exhausted but resolved, I finally made my choice. Dawn painted my chamber in hues of gold and amber, eerily reminiscent of the king's penetrating gaze. I stood at the window, watching the palace gardens come alive with early morning activity. Gardeners tending to immaculate flower beds, guards changing their positions with military precision, kitchen staff hurrying with baskets of fresh produce. The ordinary rhythm of a world I was about to re-enter as someone new. Or perhaps, as who I truly was all along. I had made my decision hours earlier, but the weight of it still pressed against my chest. 3 years of careful deception, of constructing a fragile safety through perceived weakness, all of it would end today. The thought was simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating. A soft knock at my door pulled me from my thoughts. I moved quickly to the wheelchair positioned near my bed, settling into it with practiced ease. "Enter," I called, arranging my expression into one of placid acceptance. It was Demon Rivers, not the king, who stepped into my chamber. His sharp blue eyes took in the room before settling on me, his expression unreadable. "Good morning, Lady Alara. I trust you slept well?" "As well as can be expected in an unfamiliar place," I replied carefully. He approached, his movements controlled and deliberate. "The king requests your presence in the private healing chambers," His voice lowered slightly. He believes his court physicians may be able to help with your condition. So it would begin this way. A miraculous healing to explain my sudden recovery. I nodded, keeping my face appropriately hopeful, yet skeptical. That's most generous of His Majesty, though I've consulted many healers over the years. The royal physicians possess unique abilities, Demon replied, moving behind my wheelchair. Some might even call them magical. As he wheeled me through the palace corridors, I observed the reactions of those we passed. Servants averting their eyes, nobles watching with a mixture of curiosity and pity, guards standing at attention, but tracking our progress with peripheral vision. Always watching, always assessing. This place was a wilderness of its own kind, with predators lurking behind courteous smiles and formal bows. We descended via a specially constructed ramp to the lower levels of the palace, where the air grew cooler and tinged with the scent of herbs and minerals. The healing chambers, when we finally entered them, were unexpectedly bright, skylights channeling morning sunlight into a circular room lined with shelves of bottles, books, and mysterious apparatus. At its center stood a raised stone platform, almost altar-like in appearance. The king was already there, deep in conversation with an elderly woman, whose silver hair was elaborately braided with colorful threads and small bones. They turned as we entered, the woman's pale eyes widening slightly as they fell upon me. "Lady Alara," the king greeted, his formal tone revealing nothing of our private conversation the previous day. "This is Moira, my head physician and healer. She believes she may be able to help restore function to your legs through a specialized treatment." I inclined my head respectfully. "I'm honored by your attention, though I fear my condition is beyond healing." Moira approached, her movements spry despite her apparent age. "Nothing is beyond healing if the body and spirit are willing," she said, her voice surprisingly melodic. "The king tells me you suffered a spinal injury from a fall." "Yes, 3 years ago," I confirmed, maintaining my role in this elaborate production. "I will need to examine you," Moira announced, glancing at the men. "Alone?" The king nodded. "Of course. Demon and I will return in 1 hour." His amber eyes met mine briefly. A silent question. I gave an almost imperceptible nod in response. After they departed, Moira helped me transfer to the stone platform, her hands surprisingly strong. Once I was positioned, she stepped back and crossed her arms. "So," she said bluntly, "the king tells me you can actually walk perfectly well." I stiffened in shock. "He told you?" "Of course he told me. I'm not actually going to perform magic here." She snorted, her formal manner evaporating. "I need to know what we're really doing if I'm to make this convincing." Relief flooded through me. "Yes, I can walk. My paralysis is a fabrication." Moira nodded, unsurprised. "The king rarely confides in me about court matters, so your situation must be unique indeed." She moved to a shelf, selecting various bottles. "Here's what will happen. I'll create a potion that produces a convincing physical reaction. Heat, tingling, mild discomfort. You'll drink it, I'll perform some impressive-looking rituals, and then you'll discover you can feel your legs again." The pragmatic approach was oddly comforting. "And people will believe this?" "People believe what powerful men tell them to believe," she replied, grinding herbs in a mortar, especially when it's accompanied by a good show. "Besides," she added, glancing at me with shrewd eyes, "werewolves heal from impossible injuries all the time. Your recovery will be unusual but not unprecedented." She worked in silence for several minutes, occasionally muttering to herself. I watched her, wondering what other royal secrets this woman kept. "May I ask you something?" I ventured. "You may ask." "I may not answer." "What kind of king is he, really?" Moira's hands stilled briefly before resuming their work. "Complicated. Ruthless when necessary. Fair more often than not." She looked up at me with penetrating eyes. "He protects what's his. The question you should be asking is whether you want to be counted among that number." Before I could respond, she handed me a small cup filled with dark liquid. "Drink this. It will cause warming sensations in your extremities. Dramatic, but not dangerous. I hesitated only briefly before downing the bitter concoction. Within moments, heat spread from my core to my limbs, intensifying until it was almost uncomfortable. Perfect. Moira nodded approvingly. Now we wait for our audience to return. When the king and demon re-entered precisely 1 hour later, they found me lying on the stone platform, my face flushed, while Moira waved smoldering bundles of herbs over my legs, chanting in a language I didn't recognize. "Your Majesty," she acknowledged, maintaining her performance. "The treatment progresses well. The Lady Alara has reported sensation returning to her legs." The king approached, his face a careful mask of royal concern. "Can this be true, Lady Alara?" I widened my eyes in convincing wonder. I feel warmth, Your Majesty, and something like pins and needles throughout my legs. It's uncomfortable, but I haven't felt anything there in 3 years. Demon moved closer, his expression guarded. "Moira, what exactly is this treatment?" "An ancient technique combining herbal medicine with energy manipulation," she replied smoothly. "Rarely used because of its intensity and the skill required." She placed her hands on my knees, and I flinched reflexively at the touch. A reaction that would have been impossible for someone truly without sensation. "Try to move your toes, child," Moira instructed. With appropriate hesitation, I concentrated on my feet, allowing my toes to wiggle slightly beneath the light blanket covering my lower body. "By the goddess," Demon breathed, genuine surprise coloring his voice. The king's eyes gleamed with private amusement. "Remarkable, Moira, truly remarkable." The next hour unfolded according to the script Moira had outlined. Gradual movement returning to my legs, tearful disbelief on my part, cautious optimism from the healers. By midday, news had spread throughout the palace that the Alpha King's physicians had performed a miracle, restoring movement to the paralyzed northern she-wolf. My sister was among the first visitors permitted to see me after the treatment. Mara burst into the healing chamber, her face a complex mixture of emotions, disbelief, joy, and something darker lurking beneath. "Alara, they're saying you can move your legs, that you might walk again." I reached for her hand, playing my role perfectly. "It's true, Mara. I still don't have full strength, but I can feel everything. The king's healer says with therapy, I should be walking within days." She squeezed my fingers, tears welling in her eyes. "This is incredible. Wait until I tell Mother and Father." "The king has already sent a messenger to our pack," I said, repeating the information Moira had given me. "He wanted them to hear the news directly from the royal court." "Of course." Mara nodded, then lowered her voice. "Alara, do you understand what this means? You're no longer, well, you might actually have a chance here at court." I recognized the calculation behind her concern. With my recovery, I had transformed from harmless, broken sister to potential competitor. "I'm just grateful to be healing," I replied softly. "The selection process is the furthest thing from my mind right now." Her relief was palpable. "Of course. You should focus on your recovery." She straightened, smoothing her elegant dress. "I should return to the other candidates. We're learning court protocols today." After she left, Demon entered with 2 palace guards. "The king has ordered you moved to new chambers more suitable for your rehabilitation," he explained, helping me transfer to a different wheelchair. "You'll begin physical therapy this afternoon." My new rooms were in the eastern wing, farther from the king's chambers but more spacious, with a private courtyard where, I was told, I would practice walking again under the supervision of royal physical trainers. The fiction of gradual recovery had to be maintained for believability. That evening, dressed in a simple but elegant gown of sage green silk, I was permitted to attend dinner seated in my wheelchair rather than confined to my room. The king had arranged the seating so that I was positioned at his left hand, an honor that drew curious glances and whispers from the court. "Lady Alara," he greeted me with formal courtesy, though his eyes carried our shared secret. "I'm pleased to see you joining us this evening. Moira reports your progress exceeds expectations. Your Majesty's generosity has given me hope I never thought possible," I replied, aware of the many ears straining to catch our conversation. Throughout the meal, the king engaged me in conversation about my pack, my family, my interests. Mundane topics that nonetheless kept me at the center of attention. I felt the stares of the other candidates, particularly my sister, whose smile grew increasingly strained as the evening progressed. Later, as servants prepared to wheel me back to my chambers, the king raised a hand to stop them. "I believe Lady Ilara might benefit from some fresh air before retiring," he announced. "I will escort her through the gardens myself." Whispers immediately erupted around the table. The king offering a personal escort was unprecedented, especially to a candidate who had arrived as a supposed invalid. In the moonlit privacy of the royal gardens, with guards following at a discreet distance, the king finally addressed me without pretense. "You've decided to stay," he observed. "Yes. May I ask why?" "The freedom to disappear was within your grasp." I considered my answer carefully. "Freedom to run is still a form of imprisonment. I've been hiding for 3 years, Your Majesty. Perhaps it's time to stand and face whatever comes next." He nodded, seemingly satisfied with my response. "Then we begin tomorrow. You will continue your recovery, under Moira's guidance, making visible but credible progress each day. Within a week you should be walking with assistance. By the end of the 2nd week, unassisted. And my role as your informant also begins immediately. The other candidates will see you as a curiosity now, not a threat. They'll speak freely in your presence, especially as you seem to have the king's favor." His smile was wolf-like in the shadows. "Listen. Observe. Report to me what you learn, particularly about my sister Serena. She oversees the candidates, but her loyalties are complex." The implication was clear. Trust no one, not even the royal family. What exactly am I listening for? Ambition is expected, cruelty is not. I need a queen who will be strong without being merciless, intelligent without being manipulative. He paused, his voice dropping lower. "And I need to know who among my court might be working against my interests." The weight of what I'd agreed to settled over me. Not just royal spy, but potentially identifying traitors. "That sounds dangerous, Your Majesty." "Everything of value involves risk, Ilara." He stopped walking, turning to face me fully. In the moonlight, his features were carved in silver and shadow. "But you will have my protection, as promised." His hand reached out, touching my face with unexpected gentleness. "You've survived this long through your own cunning. Now you have a king as your ally." The touch lingered a moment too long to be merely reassuring. When he withdrew his hand, something had shifted between us, a current of tension that hadn't been there before. "Rest well," he said, his voice returning to its formal cadence as guards approached. "Tomorrow your new life truly begins." As I was wheeled back to my chambers, I wondered what I had committed myself to, and why the king's touch had left my skin burning with a heat that had nothing to do with Moira's potions. 1 week into my miraculous recovery, I found myself on the stone balcony of my chambers, practicing what appeared to be labored steps with a walking cane, while actually enjoying the simple pleasure of moving freely in the open air. My assigned physical therapist, a stern woman named Lydia, who was fully briefed on my secret, stood nearby, occasionally barking convincing instructions about posture and weight distribution for the benefit of any watching eyes. "The entire court is talking about you," she informed me, adjusting my grip on the cane with theatrical firmness. "The mysterious northern she-wolf who caught the king's attention and regained the use of her legs through royal intervention." "And what are they saying?" I asked, intentionally stumbling slightly before catching myself. A perfect portrayal of someone relearning to walk. "Some say it's the moon goddess's blessing. Others say the king has special interest in you." Lydia's expression remained professional, but her eyes held warning. "Lady Serena visited me yesterday, asking detailed questions about your condition before the treatment." I nodded almost imperceptibly. In 7 days at court, I'd learned that the king's sister was as intelligent as she was beautiful, and far more dangerous than either trait would suggest. She controlled much of the court's daily functioning, while her brother handled matters of state, creating an intricate web of favors and obligations that kept most nobles firmly in her influence. "She's not the only one watching," I murmured, nodding toward a shadowed corner of the garden below, where my sister Mara sat with 2 other candidates. their heads bent in conversation. Though their voices didn't carry to my balcony, their frequent glances upward made their topic of discussion obvious. The selection process had intensified over the past week. The initial 12 candidates had been reduced to 8 after various tests of intelligence, composure, and pack knowledge. Mara remained among the favorites, her beauty and social grace making her popular with the court, if not necessarily with the king himself, who maintained a careful distance from all candidates. All except me. Each evening, he found some pretext to speak with me privately. A concern about my recovery, a question about northern pack customs, an observation about court politics that required my unique perspective. These conversations, brief but intense, inevitably circled back to what I had observed among the candidates and courtiers. Lady Caroline speaks poorly of you when you're not present, I had told him during one such meeting. She questions the convenience of my recovery and suggests you orchestrated it to distract from some political maneuver. And what do you think of that theory? He'd asked, his amber eyes gleaming with amusement. I think Lady Caroline is projecting. She's been meeting secretly with Lord Halford, who sits on your economic council. They appear to be intimately involved. He'd nodded, unsurprised. You see much from your wheelchair. People forget I'm there, I'd explained. Or they assume I'm simple as well as crippled. Their mistake, he'd murmured, his gaze lingering on me with an intensity that made my pulse quicken. Now, as I continued my therapy on the balcony, I spotted Demon Rivers approaching across the gardens. He moved with predatory grace, acknowledging the bowing courtiers with minimal courtesy before disappearing into the palace below my chambers. That's enough for today, Lydia announced loudly. You're making excellent progress, Lady Alara, but we mustn't overexert. I allowed her to help me back to my rooms, where Demon was already waiting, his tall frame imposing in the sitting area. Lord Rivers, I greeted him, carefully lowering myself into a chair with the deliberate movements of someone still adjusting to newfound mobility. To what do I owe this honor? The king requests your presence at the Woodland trial tomorrow, he said, without preamble. The remaining candidates will be tested on their tracking abilities. I frowned slightly. But I'm not fully recovered. Surely I can't be expected to participate in a physical challenge. You will observe, not compete, Demon clarified. The king believes your unique perspective may be valuable. After Demon left, I moved to the window, gazing out at the palace grounds as the setting sun bathed everything in golden light. Tomorrow would mark a significant escalation of my role as the king's informant, observing the candidates not in the controlled environment of the palace, but under the stress of competition in the wild. The Woodland trial began at dawn the following day. I was transported to the forest edge in an open carriage, still maintaining the pretense of limited mobility, though I now walked, with a cane for short distances. The king and his entourage awaited the candidates in a clearing half a mile into the royal forest, where a pavilion had been erected for viewing the competitors' return. Lady Alara, the king acknowledged me as I was helped to a cushioned seat near his elevated position. I trust the journey wasn't too taxing for your recovery? Not at all, Your Majesty, I replied, aware of the curious glances from courtiers and the barely concealed resentment from some candidates. I'm honored to be included. Serena stood at her brother's side, her beauty enhanced rather than diminished by the practical hunting attire she wore. Brother, are you certain Lady Alara should be present for this? The excitement might prove overwhelming for someone in her delicate condition. On the contrary, the king replied smoothly, I believe the fresh air will aid her healing. Besides, she has a unique appreciation for overcoming physical limitations. Something in his tone made Serena's eyes narrow fractionally before her perfect court mask reasserted itself. Of course. How thoughtful. The trial itself was straightforward. Each candidate would be given the scent of a specific herb that had been planted at various points throughout the forest. They would track their designated scent, retrieving as many samples as possible within 2 hours. The challenge tested not only their werewolf senses, but their strategy and woodland knowledge. As the candidates disappeared into the forest, the court settled in for a leisurely morning of refreshments and gossip. I remained alert, listening to the conversations flowing around me, while appearing absorbed in a book the king had provided. an ancient text on pack law that served as my cover for observing without participating. A clever way to keep you close without raising questions, the king murmured as he paused beside my chair, ostensibly examining the book in my hands. What have you heard? Lord Halford is conspicuously absent today, I replied quietly. Lady Caroline seemed distressed before the trial began, and your sister has been watching me since my arrival. His expression revealed nothing, but I sensed his heightened interest. Continue observing. We'll speak later. The hours passed slowly. Court musicians played soft melodies. Servants circulated with refreshments, and nobles engaged in the practiced dance of court politics. Compliments concealing criticisms, alliances forming and dissolving in the space of a conversation. I noticed Demon periodically disappearing into the forest, presumably checking on the candidate's progress. Each time he returned, he spoke briefly with the king before resuming his vigilant position. It was during one of Demon's absences that Serena approached me, a goblet of wine in her perfectly manicured hand. Lady Ilara, she said, her voice musical and pleasant. May I join you? Of course, Your Highness, I replied, marking my place in the book. She settled gracefully beside me, arranging her hunting leathers with the same precision she would a formal gown. Your recovery has been quite remarkable. The entire court speaks of little else. I'm grateful for His Majesty's intervention, I said carefully. Without his insistence on trying new treatments, I would still be confined to my wheelchair. Yes, my brother has taken a rather personal interest in your case. Her smile didn't reach her calculating eyes. One might wonder why, when he has so many matters of state requiring his attention. I met her gaze steadily. Perhaps His Majesty sees value in demonstrating that broken things can be mended. Or perhaps he simply enjoys the challenge of solving puzzles. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to ensure privacy. Tell me, Lady Ilara, what exactly passed between you and my brother on the night of your arrival? Before your miraculous treatment began? Ice slid down my spine, but I maintained my composure. His Majesty spoke kindly to me about the possibility of healing. He gave me hope when I had none. Serena studied me, her amber eyes so like her brother's yet lacking their occasional warmth. Hope is a dangerous gift, especially when bestowed by a king. She rose smoothly. Enjoy the remainder of the trial, Lady Ilara. I look forward to seeing how much further your recovery progresses. The threat beneath her courtesy was unmistakable. As she walked away, I fought to control my breathing. Serena suspected something, perhaps not the full truth, but enough to consider me worthy of her attention. In the court of the Alpha King, such attention was rarely beneficial. Horns sounded at the forest edge, signaling the first candidate's return. Lady Caroline emerged, clutching several sprigs of her designated herb, her hunting clothes immaculate despite 2 hours in the forest. The court applauded politely as she approached the king's pavilion, presenting her findings with a graceful curtsy. One by one, the remaining candidates returned, some triumphant with abundant harvests, others clearly frustrated by limited success. My sister was among the last to emerge, her blonde hair disheveled, but her expression victorious as she presented more specimens than any previous competitor. Impressive, Lady Mara, the king acknowledged. You have a natural talent for tracking. Mara's smile was radiant as she accepted his praise. Thank you, Your Majesty. The forests of the Northern Pack prepared me well for this challenge. Her gaze slid to me, a flash of superiority crossing her features before she composed herself. In that moment, I saw clearly the dynamic that had defined our relationship for years. Her need to excel where I could not, her identity built partly on being the able sister to my broken one. My recovery, however gradual, threatened that dynamic in ways she likely didn't fully understand herself. The final candidate stumbled from the forest empty-handed. Her failure met with poorly concealed disdain from the court. The king rose, signaling the conclusion of the trial. You have all demonstrated varying degrees of skill today, he announced. Tonight, we celebrate your efforts with a feast. Tomorrow, 3 of you will leave court. Mao, his eyes swept over the assembled candidates, revealing nothing of his thoughts. Choose your allies carefully. The path to becoming queen requires more than individual excellence. As the court prepared to return to the palace, the king approached my chair, offering his arm with formal courtesy. Walk with me, Lady Ilara. The exercise will strengthen your legs. The gesture, performed before the entire court, sent immediate ripples of whispers through the crowd. I accepted his support, rising with careful deliberation and taking my first public steps without my cane, leaning on the king's arm instead. We moved slowly toward the waiting carriages, my steps intentionally unsteady but improving with each pace. Guards and courtiers maintained a respectful distance, but I felt the weight of many watching eyes, particularly Serena's and Mara's. "You've made an enemy of my sister," the king said conversationally, though his voice was pitched for my ears alone. "I believe I had that honor before we ever spoke," I replied. "She sees too much." "As do you." His hand covered mine where it rested on his arm. "Tonight's feast will eliminate 3 candidates. I need your observations before I make my final decision. You already know who you'll choose as queen," I stated rather than asked. His mouth curved in a brief, surprising smile. "Perhaps. But a king's decisions must appear fair and considered, especially when they may prove unconventional." We had reached the royal carriage. To my shock, the king himself assisted me inside rather than passing me to a waiting servant. Even more surprisingly, he joined me, signaling the driver to proceed before the rest of the court had mounted their horses and carriages. Alone in the gently swaying vehicle, the pretense of formal distance evaporated. The king studied me with open intensity, his amber eyes reflecting the afternoon sunlight filtering through the carriage windows. "Serena suspects I've shared confidential information with you," he said without preamble. "She believes you're either manipulating me or being used as my pawn." "Which does she consider more likely?" I asked, genuinely curious. "She hasn't decided, hence her warning to you today." He leaned forward, his voice deepening. "My sister forgets that I chose to be king when many thought I would refuse the crown. She forgets that I see as much as she does, perhaps more. Why are you telling me this? Because tonight will be dangerous for you." His expression grew grave. "You've become a variable in Serena's carefully controlled equation. She will test you, possibly publicly." Fear flickered through me, but I straightened my spine, refusing to cower. "Then I will be tested." Something like approval flashed in his eyes. "There are those who believe I need a politically advantageous match. A she-wolf from a powerful family, trained in court diplomacy, capable of strengthening alliances through bloodline and breeding." I nodded. "A traditional choice. I have never been particularly traditional." His hand moved to cover mine, his touch warm and unexpectedly gentle. 3 years ago, you chose deception over subjugation. You created your own path when all conventional options were closed to you." My heart began beating faster, though I couldn't quite identify why. "I did what was necessary to survive." "No," he countered, his gaze never leaving mine. "You did what was necessary to live on your own terms. There's a profound difference." The carriage slowed as we approached the palace gates. The king withdrew his hand, resuming his regal posture as if our intimate conversation had never occurred. "Tonight," he said as the carriage door opened, "remember who you truly are beneath all the masks we wear. Not the paralyzed daughter, not the miraculous recovery, not even my hidden informant." His eyes held mine for one final, intense moment. "Remember the woman who had the courage to fall from a cliff rather than surrender her freedom." As I was helped from the carriage, my legs genuinely unsteady from the intensity of our exchange, I realized with sudden clarity what had been building between us since that first confrontation in my chambers. Not just alliance or mutual respect, but something far more dangerous. A recognition of kindred spirits, a pull toward each other that defied the carefully constructed roles we played for the rest of the world. Tonight's feast wouldn't just eliminate 3 candidates from the selection process. It would determine whether I would remain safely in the shadows of court politics or step fully into the blinding light of royal attention, with all the peril and possibility such attention entailed. As I prepared for the evening, my grandmother's pendant resting against my skin, her words echoed in my mind with new meaning. "Sometimes the greatest strength is in making others believe you have none." But perhaps, I thought as I gazed at my reflection, true strength lay in finally revealing oneself, despite the risk. In standing tall after years of forced stillness, in embracing not just survival, but the promise of truly living. Tonight I would discover which path was mine to walk.